by CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, Cannabis Radio. It's Monday night, and so that means you're in the studio listening to me, Georgia. How are you? I am, as always, in the studio with my producer, Chris. What's happening, Chris?
How's it going?
How's it going? It's going good. And of course, we have some puppies running around. They're on a barking kick. I don't know what's going on. It's, I mean, you say that, but I'm just trying to talk to them in their language. You know, when you're with people, you need to meet them on whatever level they're on, and they're on the yap level lately. But so Hayes and Diesel are in the studio, and of course, you know what? I've said this 100 times, but I do this show for two purposes. The main purpose is to talk about information that we need to talk about regarding ending the war on drugs and making sure that cannabis is legal for all people all over. We're moving right along with that. And then the second reason is because I like to hang out with my friends. And so tonight in the studio, I have one of my good friends, Rob Hunt, who has started an organization in Massachusetts called the Coalition for Responsible Patient Care, and we're going to talk to him later on about what that means and what's happening in Massachusetts. First, we are going to call another one of my good friends. See, this is good friend night. This is fantastic. My friend Matt Abel, who, as you guys know, because he's been on the show several times, is an attorney out of Detroit. He is an attorney with Cannabis Counsel, and man, Michigan has had a crappy-ass week. In case you didn't hear, the Supreme Court decided that sales are not legal under their medical marijuana measure. And we're going to have Matt talk a little bit about that, and we're just going to call him in just a couple minutes. But want to bring you back to a little bit of local news. As we get closer to the end of the month, we are going to have to make some decisions and make some recommendations to the General Assembly through the Amendment 64 Governor's Appointed Task Force. And this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. You know, in previous rulemaking sessions and decision-making, recommendation-making sessions, for medical marijuana, the 25-person panel worked really, really hard, hours and hours of work to not have a lot of the recommendations heard. Right now, the governor's task force is definitely not on the same page. They just agreed that they want to see a 5 nanogram per se DUID bill. They support that. Despite the fact that there is really no science that shows that a 5 nanogram blood level would automatically make someone impaired. There's not science like there is in the alcohol impairment world. And we know that that's going to harm a lot of patients who have a blood level that is consistently high because of their regular use, and they show zero impairment. As you guys know, my personal beef is that there's already a driving while impaired under the influence of drugs, and we don't have to pass another form of legislature to deal with marijuana. It's already part of our rules now, but gosh, we have to keep our roads safe, and I guess passing more laws to criminalize more people is what it's going to take. Anyhow, let's go ahead and call Matt Abel. He is, as I said, with Cannabis Counsel. You can visit them on the web, cannabiscounsel.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about the craziness that is Michigan this year. So this is always my favorite part when we call and we hear the ring ring.
Hello, Matt Abel.
Ring ring sound. Ring ring. Thank you. Well done. Is Matt on the air? I can't hear him.
Hi.
Hi, Matt. Because I have
Hello,
to wear
Georgia.
headphones. You guys can put on headphones too. Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. I
Um,
was at HempCon this weekend in LA, and I'm a little jet lagged, and it was fun. But I'm back in Michigan. It was the absolute worst timing because I was at the airport when a prosecutor I know called me to let me know the Supreme Court decision had come down. Right before I boarded a plane, when I was being besieged by calls from reporters
me.
and clients and everybody else.
So give us a little history on this past week. A lot happened in just a few days.
It did. Well, the week before, the Court of Appeals had ruled that patient-to-patient, uncompensated patient-to-patient transfers were legal. And then on Friday, the Supreme Court wiped that out and said that the only transfers that are legal are from a caregiver to one of their up to 5 patients, and that even a patient cannot transfer it to another patient, compensated or not, that it's not within the act. And so that, if enforced, would be the death knell for dispensaries. And
Right.
everyone who's contacting me, I'm telling them we need a legislative solution to this. The court has ruled, and people are calling me frantically, trying to give different interpretations to the words in the statute, and I have to explain to them, listen, that argument's been settled by the court, whether we like it or not. It is. I can read you 2 short paragraphs.
Yes.
From there, it's interesting because the Supreme Court, they wrote about a 20-page opinion, but they put together an appendix that only has 6 paragraphs. That's kind of the Cliff's Notes version, if you will. And I'm just going to read you 2 of them.
Okay.
Section 3 says, to be eligible for immunity, a caregiver must be engaging in marijuana-related conduct for the purpose of alleviating the condition or symptoms of a patient to whom the caregiver is connected through the registration process. Okay, so, and then, as a result, the law does not offer immunity to a patient who transfers marijuana to another patient, nor does it offer immunity to a caregiver who transfers marijuana to anyone other than a registered qualifying patient to whom the caregiver is connected. And I don't see any way around that. I mean, that's the court's own words. Those are the court's own words, and it sums up the state of the law in Michigan. They have chosen the most conservative interpretation possible under this law.
So why? What happened?
Well, the case was a dispensary in Mount Pleasant, college town, home of Central Michigan University, Fire Up Chips, where I went to school.
Yay.
So these guys were running a dispensary. In fact, somebody got college credit for designing a caregiver model dispensary or something. They had a particular model with a lockbox theory where caregivers supposedly would, with the consent of their patients who didn't need all of the medicine, allow it to be transferred to other patients. And so the dispensary took a 20% commission. And they were trying to claim that they were just facilitators, that they really weren't in possession of all of the marijuana, and that they were just facilitating the patient-to-patient transfers. And the court said, no, you can't do that. They had won at the dispensary had won at the trial court level and then lost in the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals really botched the law, as our Court of Appeals regularly does, in a way ruling that transfers of marijuana were legal, but sales of marijuana were not. And so at least the Supreme Court corrected that huge error in legal reasoning, because the law prohibits delivery or transfer regardless of sale or compensation or donation or anything like that. So you just can't pass it's a felony again to pass a joint to the person standing next to you.
Isn't that insane?
So pardon me if I don't pass it.
Right.
Know?
Right. So, what is the Republican Representative Mike Calton of Nashville says he's going to introduce a bill to legalize medical marijuana shops now?
He had introduced a bill in the last session of the legislature. It was House Bill 5580, I believe, and he called them provisioning centers. And I'm sure there are modifications. I haven't seen any drafts of the new bill. One of the big concerns is that individual and caregiver growing rights might be thrown under the bus, and a lot of us don't want that to happen.
Sure.
They think it's the beginning of the pharmaceuticalization, or maybe a continuation of it, but that would open the door for big pharma to come in, that all of a sudden it would be rescheduled or descheduled, and then they would, and then only perhaps allow the plant extracts, derivatives, the Sativex, Sativex kind of stuff.
Do you think that's really going to happen? Is that really a concern?
I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, it seems a bit far-fetched that there'd be that much of a plan, but on the other hand, I wouldn't ever put anything past corporate America.
Well, there definitely has to be a dollar sign and enough zeros to make it worth it for any big corporation to do that. And really, it doesn't feel like even Marinol has been a huge moneymaker.
Probably not, but Georgia, I think they're going to need something to replace all the opiates they've been selling once people start cannabis in its place.
Well, that is probably one of the most interesting, unfortunately, things I've heard all day today is that's what they're going to, I mean, that's really unfortunate.
Well, that's not my I mean, I'm just repeating rumors that I've heard and people's fears on the street. And so I'm making certain that when I tell people to contact their legislators, that I emphasize that we need to tell them that we want to protect individual and caregiver growing rights and not end up like Arizona, where if you live with 25 miles of a dispensary, you can't grow.
Right.
That'd be terrible. I mean, if you were growing some nice medicine and then all of a sudden a dispensary moves in nearby, and then not only can you not grow, but you have to buy their junk at their inflated prices. You're limited. Well, you don't have to go there, I guess, but maybe you do.
You have to do something, right?
Right.
So I love to quote things from salon.com. It's one of my favorite sources. And they had a really interesting little blurb today. Medical marijuana brings in $10 million for Michigan. The economic argument for legalization is appealing to more and more state houses, which is, the irony of this coming out at this particular time. But it quotes a Detroit Free Press article that says, a report says nearly $10 million in revenue was collected from applicants, more than double the cost of running the program.
Right, I think they spent less than $4 million on the administration of it.
I mean, at what point do you stop trying to push your moral beliefs on someone and start trying to get yourself out of a financial hole?
It's hard to say. I mean, if common sense prevailed, we would have ended this a long time ago. So, where do you start? And Detroit's a good incubator for that, absolutely. In fact, today there are rumors that the governor's already decided to appoint a financial manager for the city to take over from the elected government. There's been a big issue about Island Park. Belle Isle is the largest island park in the United States, I believe, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park in Manhattan. It was beautiful back in the 1900s, and so now it's run down, and the city, the state offered to take it over and make it a state park, and the city refused.
Wow.
And, so there's a lot of city-suburban split, or Detroit and outstate split here. But meanwhile, we counted 24 dispensaries in Detroit last week, and I bet there are at least as many today. I can't imagine any of them closed.
Are you advising them to close? if someone were to ask you?
Now, I am advising all of my clients to comply with the law, absolutely. And our clients, the only business model really that appears to be working is where you will service only your 5 patients, if it's that. And if you have a network, you need to have a daisy chain network. Even though someone is a patient, they also could be a caregiver.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's a mess. I mean, there is no very good workaround for it. I mean, unless you're extremely regimented, and plus it's a real problem. And the biggest problem is going to be for the patients who've been relying on dispensaries to obtain a particular variety of stuff, or medibles that they don't know how to make, or tinctures, or
absolutely,
or rubs. How do a lotion? Not everybody can do that.
No, it's difficult. Trust me, I've tried them all. So Matt, what's going to happen next?
Well, there's a lot of pressure. There's going to be, hopefully, a lot of pressure on the legislature to do something. Our law was modeled after the Rhode Island law, and Rhode Island's law was amended to allow for dispensaries. And so that's what we need to do. We need to allow a local option where communities can adopt ordinances or ban them, perhaps, where there are enough communities, I think, where they won't all ban them. I mean, some people think that dispensaries that a community should not be allowed to ban a dispensary. I don't think we need to fight that fight. If we have to, if they all ban them, and if it got to be a problem.
Well, I mean, we're doing that in Colorado. Colorado's Amendment 20 and 64 both allow for local municipalities to make determinations as to whether or not it makes sense for their community. And we've had, Fort Collins went ahead and banned medical marijuana centers, and then in the following year election, put it to the voters again, and they came back. I mean, the voters didn't know exactly what they were voting for. They didn't realize that by voting out stores, they voted out the regulated portion of medical marijuana, and they wanted it back. Mm-hmm. So, well, I'm gonna keep harassing you to find out more information, and we wish Michigan well. That maybe this representative will get.
Here, we're looking forward to spring and see what happens. We need to go beat up on the legislature for a while.
All right. Well, keep us posted. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, our website is CannabisCounsel.com, CannabisCounsel.com, or the number in our office is 313-446-2235. We're in beautiful downtown Detroit. If you're ever here, feel free to stop in and visit. We have patients' rights, but unfortunately we just can't pass the joint to you. You'll have to bring your own, apparently.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure. I'm sorry that this wasn't an exciting win for Michigan, but whatever it takes for me to get to talk to you makes me happy.
Well, it's always good to talk with you, Georgia. And as my father used to say, there have to be bad days in order for there to be good days. So
I like that.
Evens out. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We've been talking to Matt Abel from Cannabis Counsel in Detroit, Michigan. You're listening to iCannabis Radio. We're going to take a quick ad break and come back and talk to my friend Rob Huntz. We're brought to you tonight by Counsel, Collimore & Company. They're able to provide commercial general liability and property insurance to dispensaries and growers. They can provide commercial general liability up to $1 million protection if you're sued because someone is injured on your premises or because they claim the product that they purchased from you caused them harm. They can also provide you property insurance, which covers direct physical loss to the business's personal property unless the loss is limited or excluded. In addition, there's a loss of business income, which can be included. This covers a loss net of profits and continuing expenses if the dispensary cannot open during an insured loss. If you are interested in getting a quote or getting more information, please don't hesitate to call Counsel, Collimore & Company. You can reach them at 877-335-1234. That's 877-335-1234. Or email rtc@iwic.net. That's rtc@iwic.net. I'm Georgia. You're listening to iCannabis Radio, and we'll be back in a flash.
Are you a medical marijuana patient or interested in finding out how to become one? Contact Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern. Conveniently located on Hamden and Tamarack in the Whole Foods parking lot behind Proof of the Pudding, Mile High Wellness offers a wide variety of edibles, hashes, and some of Colorado's top strains. Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern. 3525 South Tamarack, Suite 110, on the corner of Hamden and Tamarack. 720-382-8516. Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern.
I'm Gary Johnson, and you're listening to Cannnabis Radio, and I want to say, talk it up, Colorado.
Gary Johnson says, talk it up, Colorado. We're back. So I'm just kind of bummed. Like I feel like I say this all the time, that we are so insulated in Colorado with how good stuff is for us and how it keeps getting better. And I feel like every time I go to these Amendment 64 Task Force subgroup meetings or whatever, and they're frustrating, I'm like, God, at least what we're doing is making rules that allow for adult use, sales, and regulation of marijuana. But here we have a state that in 2008 passed medical, and here we are in 2013, and the entire game just changed for them. But in the studio, I have Rob Hunt. Rob, say hello.
Hello.
Hello to the people. Rob has an interesting and varied background. He is here today specifically to talk about Massachusetts, which, as you guys know, in November passed medical marijuana legislation when it went to the voters, which is pretty exciting. And Rob has started an organization called the Coalition for Responsible Patient Care. Tell us a little bit about this organization.
The CRPC was started in Massachusetts mainly to make sure that when the legislature and the Department of Public Health went to the table to try to determine how we were going to regulate the law that was passed in November, it was called Question 3. That would be done in a sensible way that made sense for patients, made sense for caregivers, regulated the dispensary industry, and did it from a perspective that we weren't trying to gain anything besides showing proper legislation and allowing an industry to flourish in a very well-regulated and very sensible manner.
So essentially, this is an organization of businesses that is standing up and saying we want regulation, we want this to work, and we want to be at the table when these regulations are written.
That's exactly right. A lot of what we did was looking at other states that had come before us, whether it was California, Colorado, Arizona, Rhode Island, Maine, and looked at what they'd done right, and then also looked at what they'd done wrong. And what we tried to do is come up with best practices that we could submit to the Department of Public Health in advance of their listening sessions, in advance of the meetings they were having internally, and saying, hey, we can probably provide you a much better framework from with which to work than you might otherwise be able to do on your own due to the fact that you don't have experience in this arena. And you've basically been thrown a law that said, all right, the voters passed this overwhelmingly, almost 2-1. Now what do we do? And what we said is, look, let us help you. And it's made up of different professionals in the industry, whether they're gardening store owners, prospective dispensary license seekers, medical physicians, and medical professionals. If you're involved in the industry either directly or in an ancillary way, and you want to get involved and you want to have a voice that speaks to making sure you're protected under the law and making sure that the legislature knows that what you're doing is coming from the standpoint of true regulation and sensible policy, then the CRPC is an organization that you should get involved with.
Now, they can get more information at the website is?
It's www.crpc-ma.org. That's crpc-ma.org.
And it gives you information about the organization, has some news, and then there's a members tab as well. You just need to sign in to give some information to get access to the members tab. Is that correct? That's correct.
And we also have a Facebook page that we're actually much more proactive on updating. Anything that comes out in the way of recent articles, whether they're for the state of Massachusetts or they're related to other New England states, or even for different municipalities around the Massachusetts area. Much like Colorado, many municipalities have come out and said, well, we know the voters passed this, but we're not sure if this is for us. Having said that, many of them are being premature about it because until DPH comes out with the rules and regs, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel and having a lot of these municipalities say, okay, let's figure out our zoning regulations, or let's figure out whether or not we want to ban them outright. So there's a lot more to it that a lot of the city councils now are taking a look at and saying, okay, we need to get our hands around this, and the best way to do that is to allow for the legislature and for the DPH to actually come out and file the rules and regs, which should be theoretically done by May 1st. So we're out there trying to pass the correct information on to the people. So you can always find us not just on our website, but also at Coalition for Responsible Patient Care on Facebook, and any news that we have that we want to share with you and our take on what it means to your community or to your city. It's a resource for all people.
So in question 3, how much of that was ferreted out, or was it just a pretty small question that was passed, and then a lot of work needs to be done to put the meat to the bones? Yeah,
it was a well-written law. It did cover quite a bit. It covered as much as you could expect would be able to be done in something that was easily digestible by the layperson. But there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done, especially in the aspects of zoning, security, transportation, where you can actually put the facilities. What was really talked about in the law that was good was what the framework was going to be from which to build on. The problem was that there's certain exceptions that were in the law, such as hardship exception, and I think we just heard from Michigan from Matt discussing this as well. In Arizona, they passed a law saying if you're within 25 miles of a dispensary, then you no longer have the ability to home cultivate. In Massachusetts, there's in the law as written right now, there's what's called the hardship exception, which speaks to the fact that if you are financially unable, or if you are too far away proximity-wise, then you'll have the hardship exception to be able to cultivate on your own. Now, they didn't go any further than that, and obviously it needs to be elaborated on as what exactly qualifies for that hardship exception. And until any dispensary is open, theoretically everyone qualifies for that hardship exception. So
good point. That's right. That's like in Colorado. If you are homebound, then you can have a designated person purchase and bring your medicine to you, or a center can actually deliver. But there isn't a definition of homebound, and even if a physician checks homebound on your application, it doesn't end up on your card. So there really is no way to be qualified as homebound, but it's that same kind of idea.
Right, and of course, there's a lot of ambiguity, even with what the hardship exception says. I mean, someone that lives 1 mile away from a dispensary, let's say in Boston, might be as much of a hardship as someone that lives 50 miles away from a dispensary in western Massachusetts. Just being able to get from point A to point B with traffic, with everything else surrounding the Boston area, what defines hardship and what defines the distances that are going to be counted as a radius clause surrounding a center. More importantly, from a HIPAA standpoint, from a medical standpoint, Massachusetts law doesn't include chronic pain as of right now. So the enumerated conditions, a lot of patients may not want to be seen going into a dispensary for fear of reprisal, either from employers or from neighbors, just based on the fact that immediately, because they're seen walking into one, it can be assumed that they have one of these enumerated conditions, which may be a condition that is contagious or is
has a stigma attached to it.
Exactly right.
What are the conditions? What are your?
Same as what you find with most of them. Obviously, cancer, HIV, wasting, Crohn's. And there is a catch-all still in the Massachusetts law as it stands right now that the legislature is trying to do away with, which says in any other medical condition that is recommended to be qualified under the professionals.
That's a huge catch-all.
It is, but it's one that they don't want to keep in the law as a result of it. So with CRPC, one of the things that we're doing is saying, okay, if you want to get rid of the catch-all, then at least let's add a few other enumerated conditions that aren't going to preclude patients that need care, whether or not it's chronic pain or PTSD. We want to make sure those are in the law as well, so that people have access to medicine and have access to safe medicine.
I think that chronic pain gets just such a bad rap because everyone's like, oh, sure, I can say that my back hurts or my neck hurts or what have you. But, first of all, suffering from chronic pain myself and seeing so many patients who benefit from this medicine for chronic, very painful situations. I mean, I have an older woman. She's in her 60s, patient who comes to our store who has never in her life ever smoked marijuana, not even one single time. And she is in horrific pain, and she only, just like me, she only uses the topical recommended by her physician. And, chronic pain is her inroad to be able to do that. And she's amazing. She would sing it from the rooftops, but has never in her life smoked marijuana, ever. She just got incredibly desperate and didn't know what else to do to alleviate this pain.
I think that's one thing that's overlooked often. And again, I'm not a medical professional.
I just play one on TV.
Right, exactly. Yes. I know this from working in workman's compensation law for several years, that when you actually take the opinion of a medical professional, you're taking a fact that they know how to do their job well. And if they're saying that this patient qualifies for something based on a medical opinion, they went to 6 years of medical school for that, to make that determination. So who's to say? I walk into doctors all the time who have prescribed medicine for me literally after seeing me for 30 seconds and say, okay, this is what we recommend, and here's the prescription I'm going to write for you. I don't understand the backlash that goes with chronic pain, where people say, oh, it's too much of a catch-all, and they're giving out this medication to anyone. When, as Matt Abel said earlier, you look at the opiate market and the OxyContin market and what's happening with that, and I think it's far easier still to get pills prescribed to you that are supporting a much bigger for-profit industry than what's happening on a grassroots level of trying to give patients safe medicine access.
Absolutely. And, physicians will absolutely say that they know that when they see patients, those patients expect to leave with a script. They expect to get some sort of, whether it be antibiotics or painkillers, that's the expectation. And so they feel compelled to write a prescription. And so it's really easy, like you just said, for a doc to write you a prescription for boatloads of painkillers. But we're going to second guess them when it comes to this particular substance. Right. And I think that's the toughest part that we're having with winning over some physicians and winning over people that are looking at. Physicians are coming to us saying, well, we've got several problems that we can't necessarily get around due to licensure problems. Even though we believe in the prescription and believe in the recommendation, because there's so many people and the backlash against us is strong, that a lot of physicians are still scared of taking the leap. Sure.
What we're hearing from a lot of physicians, and we're trying to get around this with salves and with concentrates, is they're saying that it's hard for us to prescribe something that is smoked, and it's hard for us to prescribe something that you can't regulate dosage. And I really think the future of what's going to happen in Massachusetts and a lot of the other states that are coming online is in the concentrates market, whether it's oils or whether or not it's vaporizers or vape pens.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a way that you can actually say to them, look, we can have this laboratory tested. There's no variance between potency from, this part of the oil to that, the way there might be with flour, from lower canopy to the top of a cola. So it's as we get further along, I think you're going to see more people that are using THC or CBD patches or are using vaporizer pens. But I think there's going to be means of delivery that are really going to get around a lot of the issues that people have now, and they'll realize that when you can use an inhaler to take the medication, it's a much different situation than what they think of as some skater kid that has a hurt elbow that says, I want to smoke weed.
Absolutely.
That's just not what's happening, and then that's what we're fighting to make sure is properly regulated in Massachusetts right now.
So we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to come back and talk a little bit more about that, a little bit more about the organization, kind of how you got. We started at the current point, but let's bring in some history as to how you got there, and then I want to talk about some stuff that's going on and get your opinion on some stuff that's going on locally. You're listening to iCannabis Radio. As always, we are brought to you by Medical Marijuana of the Rockies, your mountain source for meds, located off of exit 203 off I-70 in Frisco, Colorado. That's right. When you're heading up to Summit County and you want to stop and get some meds, definitely go see our friend Jerry at Medical Marijuana of the Rockies. They have some of the best immature plant selection as well as strain selection in the state. Check them out at mmrockies.com. That's mmrockies.com. They always update their clone selection as well as their flower selection. They're located right behind the Big O Tires in the little town of Frisco, Colorado. It's, when you're hit with Sunday traffic, the best thing you should do is pull off and go see Jerry at Medical Marijuana of the Rockies. Thanks to Jerry, we are hanging out for yet another week. Thanks, Medical Marijuana of the Rockies. You're listening to iCannabis Radio, and we'll be right back.
The law offices of Edson, Mayton, and Matz provide criminal defense, medical marijuana defense, and advice about setting up and running medical marijuana centers, optional premises cultivation operations, and infused product manufacturing businesses throughout Colorado. With offices in Denver and Aspen, we can offer assistance throughout the entire state of Colorado. Give us a call at 303-831-8188. That's 303-831-8188. Or visit us online at warrenedson.com.
The chocolatiers at Incredibles are dedicated to crafting the finest chocolate from high-quality ingredients to ensure the greatest possible medicated edibles in the world. Consistency and quality are top priority. Lab testing on each and every batch. Rick and Josh have been making non-medicated chocolates for years for such retail outlets as Whole Foods and Vitamin Cottage. Today, we are focused on crafting our award-winning medicated incredible chocolate bars. We are professional bakers, and we believe food should be made from scratch. We guarantee your satisfaction. Have an incredible day.
Hi, this is Gavin Edson, and you're listening to my mom, Georgia Edson, on iCannabisradio.com.
So my kid is trying to figure out what his 2 additional spelling words should be. Like, they get to pick 2 optional words, and he's been freaking out, knocking on the door here in the studio because he wants suggestions on his 2 additional spelling words. So if anyone has some good ideas, feel free to pass them along to me. Last week it was lacrosse and then his middle name, because he doesn't know how to spell his middle name. And you wanted to spell Mardi Gras could be one. Mardi Gras and Valentine. All right, those sound good. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about some of the issues with the catch-all chronic pain in the Massachusetts law. And you started talking about vaporizing, and I think that more, especially with the handheld vaporizers, which are one of the most popular items on the market, anywhere, everywhere. Everyone in the studio is pulling them out of their pockets. Look at this. I mean, these things are revolutionary. They're absolutely a little stroke of genius. I think that they're just amazing. First of all, I mean, as someone who pretends to be a fitness freak, the idea for me personally, smoking anything isn't my idea of a good time, but seeing other people smoke, even though really there's no evidence that there's anything toxic with long-term marijuana smoke, the idea of vaporizing is just brilliant, And so, I mean, I think that one of the things that we need to do, and that probably CRPC is doing, is educating legislators on all of these different options. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, I think if you look at the percentage of people who vaporize now and who use concentrates in this fashion now versus 2 years ago, definitely, versus 5 years ago, those numbers have jumped exponentially. Not just because people like the effect, but because people like how they feel. No one thinks it's fun to take a big rip and cough for 45 seconds. Like, that's just not a good time. I mean, actually, it's a good time for me because I think it's really funny and I enjoy laughing at people when they can't breathe and they start to turn purple. And but this is just brilliant, and I think it's much easier to be able to explain to a legislator how this really simple contraption can prove medically very beneficial to people, and it's easy to convince a doc too.
That's exactly right. It's been
I love it when people say I'm right. It happens so infrequently.
So what we've been finding is that when we're speaking to physicians and speaking to legislators, they have no idea that this technology exists.
Right.
And when we come back to them, it's, they think that it's either you're smoking flower or you're eating pop brownies. And we try to explain to them that, from a medical cannabis standpoint, there's so many other things out there, and especially now that people are getting as tricky as they are with infused juices or sodas, what they're doing with salves, what they're doing with topicals. And then if you are going to inhale to get a dosage that's very, very easy for you to regulate just as a patient, that vaporizers are the way to go. And the technology that's now coming out for better known as vape pens, but really are just e-cigarettes that are being retrofitted to take cannabis is revolutionary, and it's helping so many people because, again, you're not smoking. The THC and the CBDs, everything burns at a much lower temperature than smoke happens at. So you're able to get the effect of the medicine without having to worry about other harmful side effects, smoke being obviously the primary one.
It's extremely discreet. I would much rather sit next to someone smoking from a vape pen than smoking a cigarette, like 1,000 times. Of course, I don't want to be within a mile of someone smoking a cigarette, so I know it's so gross. It's so gross.
And there's a lot of people that don't want to be a mile within someone smoking a joint either.
Absolutely.
So to have someone that's smoking a vape pen that's doing it discreetly and doing it in a way that doesn't look any different than the person that's trying to quit smoking, it's a very simple way to be able to ingest medicine and get your medicine without being offensive to other people and without harming yourself. That's right.
And I think that, the technology of these things has already increased a lot. I can just imagine over the next year or two what they're going to be like. They are. Can you grab one? For those folks listening to our show that don't really see these very often, which I doubt there's any of you out there that haven't. But these are so discreet, and this I like this one that you can actually the cartridge. It's pretty cool. No.
And there's actually other ones, Georgia, that look just like an e-cigarette where you can't see anything. You can't see any oil. You can't see anything else in the cartridge at all. Even the one that Chris has here, you can't see where the medicine is stored. So now they've got ones that aren't just for oil. They're also for wax. There's ones you can actually load flour into if you want to. But again, the flour material, you're burning only what's the effective medicine and not the plant material that goes behind it. So it's just a much better way, I think, of ingesting medicine. It is something that you can definitely get law enforcement behind because they don't see the same stigma as people sitting around passing joints back and forth to each other or smoking bowls. And you go into public places like, let's say, concerts being a primary example. There's a lot of parents that don't want their children exposed at a concert to someone smoking a joint next to them. Whereas with a vaporizer pen, it's very discreet. It doesn't have the same smell. It doesn't have the same stigma. There's now inhalers out there that do the same thing. And you see someone hitting an inhaler, you assume obviously it's for an asthmatic, or you assume it's for something else. No one needs to know you're taking your medicine there.
That's it. Absolutely right. So as I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about some history. So why start this organization? What brought you to this point?
Sure. As an attorney here in Colorado, I'd always been interested in this movement. My final semester of law school, I actually wrote about a 70 or 80-page independent study on, at the time, the juxtaposition of 13 states having medical laws in the books, whereas marijuana was still listed as a Schedule I drug. And from a legal standpoint, I couldn't get my hands around the fact that we still had it listed as a Schedule I drug when there's that many people in the United States that had come out and said, we believe there's medical value here. And when I first submitted the idea, I expected to be vilified by my professors, and instead they all came out in droves and said, "Hey, I heard what you're writing about. Someone's been, this is fantastic." So this is back in 2006, and I had worked with interviewing people from Marijuana Policy Project, from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, from the Drug Policy Alliance, from NORML, and really put together a pretty comprehensive paper and pretty comprehensive folder of what was happening in this field. I immediately moved to Colorado upon graduation, and when I got out here, it was right as the green rush was starting to hit. And at the time, I said to myself, I'd much rather be on the side of advocating for change and working in the legal community rather than getting involved in the ground floor of what was happening as far as home cultivation, large-scale cultivation. But somehow about a year later, I ended up opening my first hydroponics store.
Yay!
And
don't you see that? I can, that's a straight road. I see that.
Right. Well, it's like, I stopped working at a firm that I'd been at, and I was looking for a new firm job, and I was day trading full time just to have a career. And in the afternoons, I worked on my non-marijuana garden, and had about 140 square feet in the backyard of my place in the Highlands. And I was going into garden stores all the time, and it got to the point where I could no longer go into the grocery store or go into the Big Tomato without having 15 guys in front of me that were, sitting in there trying to purchase stuff for their marijuana gardens. And I finally got to the point where I was like, this is crazy. As great a job as those stores did, I thought I could do a good job as well. And I knew my knowledge base just from being a gardener for years would be something that would be beneficial to the people that came in and asked advice. Now, at the time, I was very, very wary about what I could say, what I couldn't say inside the shops. And I have been until Amendment 64 passed. And for the first time now, I don't feel safe on a federal level, but I certainly feel safe now, and my employees do as well, that when people come in and say, hey, we want to grow marijuana, we want to stay within the confines of the law, and we want to do it this way, that we can say, sure, let's talk about it. And that only happened for us with the dispensaries, maybe 2.5 years ago, where I started feeling, comfortable speaking to them for the same exact reason. But these guys would walk in with a Department of Revenue stamp and a Secretary of State's letter and architect's drawings. And I got to the point I said, this is ridiculous. How Home Depot can talk to them about this. And, their sheetrocker and their pipe fitter aren't getting in trouble. Why should I be worried about, prosecution? And at that point, it really started changing my mindset, saying that these guys, people in this industry need not just good advocacy from a legal standpoint from guys like your husband, Georgia. Big shout out to Warren Edson and all the work he's done.
He's cute too. He's pretty cute. You think he's cute too, Rob? I know.
He's so cute.
He's so cute.
But
not as cute as you, Kevin.
There is no Kevin. There never was. So anyway, when it came to the time that I started opening stores on the East Coast, I opened my first store in Portland, Maine, about 3 years ago. And Portland was really going through a renaissance as well, but they were doing it in a much more regulated fashion than Colorado was. And we really started working with the groups up there that were seeking licenses and helping them build their facilities, and really taking the knowledge base of what we had from building facilities in Colorado and applying it to them, and working with legislatures as well on getting things done properly. And then it's a question of how we took that to Massachusetts and advanced the vote. But do you want to talk about that in a minute?
Sure. We'll take a quick break. As much as we love Rocky Mountain Hydroponics, we also have another grow store that we love a lot, Nodo Urban Garden Supply, located 4.5 blocks northeast of Coors Field. Rob's right. If you're interested in learning how to grow your own now that Amendment 64 has passed and is enacted and is moving forward, the folks at Nodo Urban Garden Supply are happy to help you out. Located at 1330 27th Street. They have the knowledge, skill, and the equipment to get you started in the right direction. Or if you've already been growing and you just need some equipment and some help, feel free to ask them for that as well. That's Nodo Urban Garden Supply, 1330 27th Street. They're open Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Nodo Urban Garden Supply. You're listening to iCannabis Radio. We'll be right back.
Let's face it, rules and regulations are complicated, especially in the field of medical marijuana. Let Medical Marijuana 101 help you get through the compliance process. We can also explain to you your employment requirements, your employees, and your business. But our work doesn't stop there. Our experience in cultivation ranges from the design of grow rooms to the diagnosis and resolution of grow problems. Visit us at www.medicalmarijuana101.com or call 303-388-7706. That's 303-388-7706. Are you a runner? Are you a runner who supports marijuana legalization? Run on Grass is a group of athletes actively seeking to change our marijuana laws. We speak the truth about cannabis, bringing the message through our feet to new ears. Check out runongrass.com to find out more about us, our events, and how to join up or how to sponsor a runner. If you're in the Denver area, please join us for runs or start a group in your area. Running not your thing? Any sport can do it. On Grass. runongrass.com.
Hi, this is Gavin Edson, and you're listening to my mom, Georgia Ensign, on iCannabisradio.com.
That is one cute, freaking little child, I have to say. He is a cutie pie. We were talking a little bit about... the hell were we talking about?
Just the background of Rob Hunt and how I got to the point I am today of starting CRPC.
Yes, I love that.
Really the final step for me, Georgia, was after having stores in Maine and having stores in Colorado, I'd opened a store in Massachusetts about a year before the legislation changed, on the expectation that we probably would see a change in the law and that there would be more of a need for stores like mine. Obviously, we're not a one-plant store. We're definitely not plant-specific, and we've got tons of gardeners that are traditional as well, and I love having those people in our shops because they're so much fun. But we also knew that change was coming to Mass. It was, without a doubt, it was going to pass. It was just a question by how much. And when the law did change, there's quite a few people that have been very, very instrumental in doing it. I'll give a shout out to Matt Allen and to Dick Evans and Mike Cutler and Shalene Title. There's definitely some really good people on the ground in Massachusetts that we're fighting hard for changes in legislation. The guys, again, at Law Enforcement Against Prohibition are based in Medford, Mass. So, yeah, great people.
Fantastic
big
organization.
Big fan of Jack Cole. Yeah. But when we came in there, what happened after November 6th is that you started seeing all these snake oil salesmen pop into Massachusetts and start trying to fleece their pockets or line their pockets and fleece their customer base with promising them, I'll be able to get you a dispensary license. I can do this for you. And they're telling them things that simply just weren't true.
Yeah.
And we looked at it saying this is ridiculous. You can't promise people things when the DPH hasn't even written the rules and regs yet. That you have no idea how this is going to be regulated. All we know is that Question 3 passed, but you're asking these people to pay you thousands of dollars to come in and give them false promises and false hope. And we decided there needed to be an organization that represented the needs of dispensary seekers without trying to force them to pay money for something that we couldn't deliver. And all we said to them is, yeah, you're going to have to pay for this organization, but it's not going to us. It's going to, pay the right PR people and the right lobbying groups and to make sure that our information gets to the right organizations. And, even though we all might be in competition for dispensary licenses down the road, isn't it in our best interest to have a properly regulated, sensible policy and a group that then the legislature can come speak to and say, we want to listen to what you guys have to say before we make decisions. And in a lot of ways, we took a lot of cues from Aaron Smith at NCIA, from Mike Elliott out here at MIG, as well as other advocacy groups that have been in existence for a long time. But we called them and said, what's the best way we can get involved in Massachusetts? And since then, there's another advocacy group that's popped open as well, which Brian Vicente and Christian Cederberg run, which is called the MMMA, another great organization. So if you don't join CRPC, I highly recommend you join theirs.
That sounds like a mixed martial arts group.
It's the Medical Marijuana of Massachusetts Alliance. And again, really good people. Obviously, everyone knows that Christian and Brian were just so instrumental in passing Amendment 64 and drafting the legislation for that. So for us to have another group out there in Massachusetts that we can look at and say we have a tremendous amount of respect for what they do, and they've been very, very cool about reaching out to us and saying, how do we get involved in what you guys are doing with CRPC, and let's figure out a way to work together so we're speaking with a unified voice. And I think that you'll see that the two groups doing a lot more together as we go forward. So that's really where we are. The really fun part is that the day after tomorrow is the first listening session for the Department of Public Health, and that's going to be in Worcester, Massachusetts. So we'll be meeting with them there, and that's where the DPH says, talk to us. What do you guys have to say? And quite a few of us have been able to submit documentation to them in advance to really give them a really good idea of what it is that needs to be discussed. And then there's 2 other listening sessions immediately following. DPH swears they're on track to actually have a policy in place by May 1st deadline. And if that's the case, then applications for dispensaries should start happening very soon afterwards, and we should have it with a law that's put in place that clearly defines the scope of everything that's going to regulate this market out there, so we won't have the need for additional legislation the way Colorado did with 1284. We should have something coming out of the gate that says this is how it's going to work, this is how it's going to be run, this is why it works, this is what sensible policy is. And hopefully Massachusetts will be really the litmus test of how to regulate a market with a pretty large population.
Yeah.
6.2 million people in that state. And they're ready to go. So it's a really, really exciting time right now in New England, especially in Massachusetts.
Well, and it looks like New Hampshire is going to finally go.
The governor's come out and said that they're ready.
Yep. Who's the lone wolf now?
New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. New York, once New York goes, it's going to be very, very, it's already at this point almost impossible to put the genie back in the bottle, I think. I think November 6th really let us see the first, real big swing of the hammer against, the proverbial Berlin Wall of prohibition here. And at this point, I think it's coming down. So if New York goes, and that, that's another 20 million plus people that have now spoken as a unified voice and says, we want change here. I think Pennsylvania is immediately following. Ohio right now is real close to going. Just by the fact that Arkansas this year, put it to the vote, and Arkansas was passed.
I know. Right. North Carolina is close as well.
Yeah. Even Texas now is taking a look at because of all the border wars and the border skirmishes. At a certain point, there's so many reasons to end prohibition at this point, and there's very few good reasons to keep it around. And if all you can come back is saying, gateway drug, which is there's no evidence of, or saying, it's just why do we need to introduce something else on top of alcohol and tobacco? I mean, I'd argue that marijuana of the three is the least harmful. And I think that many people out there at this point would agree with that. So it's a quite, if we can get New York to really start working on this, then I think, Georgia, we're going to see it's going to happen even quicker. So get it together,
exciting.
Albany.
Yeah, right? So exciting. I just have to ask a quick question before we do a little wrap up. So am I right that Massachusetts law says that a patient is allowed to possess a 60-day supply?
That's correct.
What does that mean?
We don't know yet.
What do you think that means?
We're hoping for a minimum of 2 ounces, but we'd like to see it almost closer to what Washington State did. We'd like to see closer to 4 ounces. Again, we'd like to see it written as a usable product rather than just flour, so that you can possess up to 4 ounces of anything that can be considered a usable product. I mean, again, when you talk about the weights of some of the topicals, if you're weighing the whole carrier, 4 ounces is very little. So it's got to be something that's going to allow a patient to get their medicine and not have to worry about going back out and back out and back out, because no one wants to go to the pharmacy any more than they need to, and no one should have to go to the dispensary any more than they need to. So we'd like to see it be a minimum of 2 ounces.
I think that sounds great. Super exciting. Tell us the website for CRPC again.
Sure. It's www.crpc-ma.org. That's crpc-ma.org.
And that's a coalition for responsible patient care. Check it out. I like the news section as well. It is a great place to just find out information about what's happening in Massachusetts. There isn't, at least I haven't found a really centralized place for that other than your website, and so I really appreciated that. Exciting things are happening. It's really fantastic, and I'm really proud of you, Rob. You have jumped in with both feet, and you are a great voice for what is going to be an amazing industry in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to give a shout out to my family on that, because 5 years ago they would have never let me do this. But my sister and my mother and the rest of my family is actually being pretty supportive, saying that the time is now to see this go through, and I can now go to cocktail parties where it's a bunch of Republicans, and I'm not vilified when I tell them I'm in the marijuana industry.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if anything, people are like, oh, I want to know more about it because we're in the biggest economic crisis that we've been in since the 30s. And, in all of these states where medical has passed and an industry has started, we have seen, a reduction in unemployment and an economic resurgence. And it can be that much better on a broader scale if we can get our act together as a nation.
I agree. Once again, so I know you love hearing that, Georgia.
I do. Thank you. So it's while it was a tough conversation to talk a little bit about Michigan, it really is exciting to talk about Massachusetts because, we're going to see that states like Massachusetts that have large populations and that are centered in areas of big populations that again, the world is not going to come crumbling down when medical marijuana centers, retail stores open and this law is enacted. And that's only going to help all of the other states, and people are going to feel more comfortable, and hopefully it can light a fire under places like Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely urge anyone that's listening out of state to come to Colorado and realize that we have dispensaries everywhere, and the sky didn't fall and locusts didn't swarm.
Nope.
And no one really gives much attention to it anymore because it's a regulated market that works, that has proper policy behind it. And the benefits have far outweighed the detriments, and it's a safe. Everything that people were worried was going to happen didn't.
Absolutely.
So if you guys are out there and you haven't been to our state yet, come check it out. It's a great place. It's
a great time to come too. I have to say that I think that kids growing up in Colorado are going to kind of look at marijuana the way that European kids look at wine.
Sure.
It's just something that happens, and it's not. There's no secret behind it. It's not stigmatized. It's just one of those things. And so, I think that there's a reason why Denver has a lower teenage marijuana use than its neighboring counties that have banned medical marijuana centers. kids in Denver are like, oh yeah, it's marijuana, big deal. Oh yeah, my parents drink wine, my parents smoke a joint. It's just not seen as this huge deal, and kids are going to have a much smarter outlook on substance use because of the way that Colorado has handled medical marijuana legalization and then ultimately marijuana legalization.
Yeah, and I think you just spoke to a really important piece too, that with children, growing up with parents that do use medical marijuana, that they realize their parents are good people and they aren't criminals. And I think that what we're seeing right now in Colorado with making the decision not to incarcerate anymore based on someone's choice of medicine or a doctor's recommendation of medicine, there's no reason that people should be going to jail for ingesting marijuana. And I mean that not just on the medical standpoint, but I do believe that even from the recreational standpoint,
Absolutely.
that this is a health issue, and it's not a law enforcement issue. It should really be about personal freedom, personal choice, and doing something in a responsible manner. As long as there's no other violent crime attached to it or anything else that's going to be detrimental to the community, then I just don't see it as something that we should be prosecuting 850,000 people a year for. And I'm really happy that tide is swinging.
Hear, 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 hear. Well, thank you so much, Rob Hunt. I appreciate you being here tonight, and I hope I can convince you to come back.
I'd love to, Georgia. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on this week. Tomorrow night on Sexpot Radio from 6 to 8, they're having their passion party. Come on down. I'm a little afraid. Chris is a little excited. So 6 to 8 tomorrow night. Then Thursday, the Hemp Connoisseur magazine has their show from 4 to 5 p.m. And, of course, Overgrow the Radio from 7 to 9. Next week on Monday, In the Lab with Jennifer Murray from Cannnabis from 3 to 4 p.m. And then 7 o'clock is me, our cannabis history lesson, so don't miss out. Thanks to our sponsors, Mile High Wellness, Noda Urban Garden Supply, Edson Maitland and Matt's Medical Marijuana of the Rockies, Cuffle Collimore and Company, Medical Marijuana 101, Run on Grass, and of course Rocky Mountain Hydroponics. Thanks so much. I'm Georgia. You're listening to iCannabis Radio, and I'll see you next week.